Dynamite was really good. At least the first hour was really, really good. And there were some moments on the show that, they kind of dipped. But if you're looking for something to just say, I just want to remember a little bit what it felt like to love early AEW. Like when you go back, if you have Max, and you've gone back and watched any of the first year shows, and you're like, I miss that. I miss that feeling. I genuinely hate whenever on AEW program they say, we've got to restore the feeling. I hate it. Because all you're doing is acknowledging to the fans who are aware of what's been said online, the online discourse, that the show isn't as good as it used to be, and that the crowds aren't as hot as they used to be, and the crowds aren't as big as they used to be. I imagine that probably a heavier portion of the AEW audience is more online than the WWE audience is about their own shows. But when you keep going out of your way to note that, like, things aren't as good as they used to be, even a week ago, like when MJF said Jeff Jarrett is the last face you see before your favorite company dies, it kind of like acknowledges in a way that him having TV time is a sign that things are they're like spiraling the drain, right? So I'm not always a big fan of it, and they do end up saying restore the feeling in the opening segment. But the thing that really, really just had to capture your attention, if you are truly a pro wrestling fan, and if you're looking for that kind of, I don't know if it's a nostalgia pop to go back to, what really wasn't that long ago, 2019 or even 2021, well out of the pandemic or well out of the pandemic restrictions, the thing that should have you the most excited was this. The opening segment that included Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and the Don Callis family was nothing short of exceptional. Now, you might not like the idea of like the concession stand brawl sort of thing that this ended up becoming, but my God, it was a fantastic start to the show. Genuinely, it was one of the most exciting, entertaining, unpredictable starts to a Dynamite show we have seen in a long time. And the first thing that stood out, and I was so glad that we got the payoff, Dynamite has gone back to this idea, and they weren't able to execute it last year because I assume they had the buildings booked out for a year, but they have finally gone with this idea of booking smaller venues that have packed crowds, that sound better, that look better, and that the venues look unique. And so they were in Knoxville, Tennessee for the show last night, and the first thing I thought to myself when I saw it was, they have this lighting rig, right? And it's got these kind of open pillar setups. Always reminds me of the final WCW Nitro in Panama City, where they had that. It was the lighting rig, but it was the 4 open pillars. I think about that. I think about like Shane McMahon climbing up one of those and diving off. Like I think Jeff Hardy did as well. It doesn't matter. I saw that and I was like, all right, like why? Why is that needed inside? Do they not have a normal light setup inside of this venue? And we got to see why. Oh, I mean, at least in part, a spot from one of the pillars. This was a great start to the show. You get Tony Schiavone in the ring in a role that I think he is perfectly suited for, being the guy to lend some immediate credibility to your show, introducing Omega, introducing Ospreay. Ospreay calls out Omega, essentially, right? And tries to tell him that he's sorry about everything that has happened between the two. And all I kept thinking to myself as this was unfolding was, how do we pivot out of what I was a little bit disappointed with a week ago, when Omega first came back and he gets jumped by the Don Callis family, and then last week we see Ospreay come out to the ring to try to help Kenny, but they're both left laying, and you have the full Don Callis family like, listen, I support wholeheartedly the idea that you need to have strong heels, and seeing the Don Callis family, right? Put away the baggage, put away the probable missed opportunities and bad booking around Lance Archer and Brian Cage, and just look at those two plus Fletcher, who you were building up as this proto-star, right? You've got him, and you have Takeshita, who I'm a big Takeshita fan right here. You put those 4 together with this absolutely hateable heel manager in Don Callis, they should at some point be the guys left standing. But last week I went, all right, like you kind of killed the god of pro wrestling vibe on Kenny, and now you also have Will Ospreay going down. I don't know. I also kind of question just in general why, if Kenny Omega is this much beloved guy, which he you would think is really the heart and soul of AEW, right, who has finally returned. Why are there no baby faces who come out to help this guy? And when he and Ospreay got jumped last week, why did nobody else come out to help? Where's, like, Mark Briscoe, for example? The Dark Order showed up at different points around the Death Riders thing. Like, where are they at? Like, where are the good guys at? I guess is my point. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this opening segment starts with Kenny saying, like, I hope you enjoyed being considered the number one in the company, but now number one's back, you're number two. Almost a heel promo. Some bass in Kenny Omega's voice. Very serious. I'm sitting there going, ooh, I'm enthralled. This is good. Oh, Shrek, this is great. We stay up late, so I'm manly. So in the morning, I make waffles. I felt like Donkey in Shrek. I did. I was loving the start. And then Don Callis' music hits. And then I go, ooh, I don't know. We had something cooking. It leads to the Don Callis family and Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay in an absolute scrap in what is essentially a concession stand brawl to start the show. Not an actual match, but a fight that leads out into the crowd, shows you this unique venue, shows you some really great angles, in fairness, of interacting with the crowd. And they end up behind the stands, which, again, if you're going to be booking these smaller venues where everything really does feel unique and it doesn't feel sterile is not the right word, because sterile would imply that there's not really a good atmosphere to it. But like instead of it being kind of like the cookie cutter, big arena, none of it really matters because most of them look the same on the inside, right? Or very similar. If you're going to have these unique venues, it's great to get out into the crowd and to show that and give it a unique feel. So they're battling through the concession stand, and eventually Omega and Ospreay kind of have this acknowledgement, right? Ospreay had tried to extend the olive branch. Omega had said no. They team up together to put Lance Archer through a table on a vertical suplex, and you go, ooh, we got something cooking. And then they make their rounds, and then we see Ospreay do almost this like wild parkour move to get up to the railing. He moonsaults. Kenny climbs this stanchion or whatever you want to call it, this column, this open column, and he does a moonsault. Now, the cameras don't exactly catch it perfectly on the first time, which is a little bit of a bummer. But you see that, and the crowd is going apeshit for it, and you say, this is what AEW did best in its infancy. This is what AEW did best coming out of COVID. This is what you expected. This is what made me create prior to this show, and I would appear on other shows. I'd call it the BCD meter, the Buff Chick Dip meter. I would always make buffalo chicken dip for Dynamite because it was worth it. It was like sitting down and watching like the most anticipated thing of the week, right? And I'd say, all right, like this got like a 4 on the BCD. Like it was almost a great show. 5 on the BCD. It's essentially star ratings, right? But like the overall, and I'm not as generous, I guess, with the bowls of Buff Chick Dip as like Dave Meltzer is with the stars. But I would like use that to define whether or not I thought the show was worth watching or not. This took me back to those days where I'm like, yo, this isn't perfect. And I'm sure that like Bischoff and Cornette are going to tear it apart. And I still listen to those guys and I enjoy their shows and I like take everything with a grain of salt. But I know that they're going to have problems with it. But from my vantage point, as somebody who just wants to see AEW like rediscover something about it that made it unique for a long time, I loved this. And you get Omega making the challenge while these two are up there on the stanchion, on the pillar. And they make this challenge to Fletcher. And they make the challenge to Takeshita for a tag team match down under at Grand Slam Australia, which, in fairness, we covered last week. Total mess. Now it's going to be aired on TNT and Max after All-Star Night, which is probably going to be like midnight, 1 o'clock when these guys finally get to the ring, maybe 2 in the morning. By the time they get to the ring, not ideal. Doesn't matter. It kind of matters, but doesn't matter. All of that aside, just from a match perspective, you're going to have this nice show, not a stadium show, but a very nice show in Australia, and you're going to have Ospreay and Omega on one side and Fletcher and Takeshita on the other. That is a must-see match. Doesn't matter if it's a pay-per-view. Doesn't matter if it's a, elevated version of Dynamite, right? A special show. It's going to be a great match. This, set the tone for the rest of the show.